Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Before we start with our today's analysis, a quick gentle reminder. As part of Target Prelims 2022, our tomorrow's session would be with respect to environment and ecology, and please do tune in from 7:30 to 9:30 p.m. This session will be handled by Mukesh Jha sir. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says a victory for crime victims. Before we understand what this article is all about, let's understand what is the criminal procedure. Let's assume for a moment there is a murder that is committed in one of the places. As soon as this murder is committed, this happens to be a cognizable offense. So whenever there is a cognizable offense, what exactly happens? You immediately report it to the police station. The police officers need not have to consult the court. They need not have to take the permission from the court and can directly go ahead with arresting that particular person. So after this particular arrest has been made, what are the procedures that happens? The first important procedure happens to be investigation. What is this investigation? Basically, this is the preliminary stage of an inquiry made by the police officers. So what you first have is the first information report. So you have a cognizable offense. This cognizable offense has been committed in one of the areas. It can be murder, it can be rape, it can be any other heinous crimes as well. So the minute there is a murder, heinous crime or any of the cognizable offenses, in such a case, the police would be able to register an FIR. So the police, as part of this investigation, will register an FIR in the police station. So they immediately proceed to that particular spot where the offense has been committed. They will try and understand what is the root cause of this particular issue, ascertain certain facts and the circumstances of this particular case. They will also try and discover what are the material evidences that are present in that particular place. Let's say, for example, if there is a murder, let's say a knife has been used and this has been used to kill that particular person, or a gun has been used to fire at another person. So this gun as well as knife that has been used becomes the evidence for the police officers. So discovering and arresting this particular person, bringing him and putting him behind bar and collecting all the evidences of that particular offense happens to be the first stage of criminal procedure. So the first stage of criminal procedure when it comes to the criminal investigation system happens to be the investigation. This happens to be the first process. So what we have is this particular investigation ends in a police report, that which is given to the magistrate. So the second important procedure as part of the criminal procedure happens to be the inquiry. What is this inquiry? According to CRPC section 2 of G, the Code of the Criminal Procedure 1973, inquiry means every inquiry other than a trial conducted under this code, which means Code of the Criminal Procedure, by a magistrate or a court. For example, in some of the cases, there might be a close coalition with the police officers as well as other people as well. So in that case, the magistrate will not just accept that particular case. The court of law will not just accept that particular case. The court of law, that is the judges, the magistrate, will also conduct an inquiry. So this inquiry will basically ascertain whether that particular crime has to be accepted or not. They also take cognizance of this particular case as well, and this ultimately means that according to section 2 of G, the second procedure that is laid in the criminal process happens to be inquiry. So once the investigation is completed, the matter will be brought before the magistrate or that particular concerned court, and then the magistrate seeks to find out whether that particular person, the so-called accused, should he be committed to the sessions court or not. So this particular inquiry or investigation conducted by the judiciary in the country is what is called as inquiry in the criminal process. That happens to be the second procedure. The third happens to be the trial. So this happens to be the third step in the criminal procedure. What exactly happens in trial? This is about the court trying and identifying whether that particular person has committed a crime or not. Should he plead guilty or he is innocent? So ultimately, the court will hear all the processes, evidences, documents. It will examine number of people and ultimately determine whether that particular person has to be convicted or acquitted for this particular case. This is the third stage when it comes to the CRPC. So when we speak about the Criminal Procedure Code, as part of this process, there are three important steps. First is the investigation, second is the inquiry, third is the trial. What is this article currently speaking about? This article currently goes on to say, according to the Supreme Court, which was led by Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramana, in Jagjit Singh versus Ashish Mishra, the court goes on to say that victim has unbridled participatory rights from the stage of investigation till the culmination of the proceedings, and the presence of state is not tantamount to according a hearing to the victim of the crime. Let me decipher this statement for you. This is very important when it comes to the criminal justice system in the country. What is the court trying to convey here? When you look at the victim, who is a victim? A victim means a person who has suffered any loss or injury caused by reason of the act or omission for which the accused person has been charged, and the expression victim includes his or her guardian or the legal heir. Who is a victim? Let's assume for a moment there is a murder. So if there is a murder, or let's assume for a moment there is a rape, any of the cognizable offenses. So a person who's gone through this grievous attempt is the victim, and the person who's committed this happens to be the accused. So any person who's gone through this particular crime happens to be the victim. So what is this judgment given by the Supreme Court? So the Supreme Court goes on to say that when it comes to the criminal justice system in India, what exactly happens? We have the state, which happens to be the prosecuting agency. Whenever a crime is committed, you have the prosecuting agency, which always will be the state. Why the state? That is because the state has the responsibility to take care of each of us. Let's say there is a civil dispute. In the civil dispute, let's say I have a property dispute with you. So what exactly happens? This is the dispute between me and you. So there is no state involvement. But when it comes to the criminal cases, the state is directly involved. Why is that the state is directly involved? That is because you have violated my rights, or I have violated your rights. The state is the protector of all of our rights. If someone else is snatching away my life or your life or hurting it, in that case the state immediately steps into picture when it comes to the criminal cases. If it is civil cases, it is directly between one individual with another individual. There is no state that is involved. But if it is a criminal case, then you would have the state which will act as a prosecuting agency. So in all criminal cases, you would have the victim, you will also have the accused. The accused is called as the defense. Then you have the victim, which will be the prosecution, and the prosecution will always be represented by the state. So the state representing officer is called as the public prosecutor. So in this entire proceedings that we have with respect to the criminal issues, the victims will not play much of the role. Why do they not play much of the role? Because you have the state representing the victim. So it is the state which will play all the actions for the representation of the victim. But when it comes to the accused, the defense is present, the defense lawyers are present, the defense advocates are present. They directly take care of this particular case. The defense is where the accused will also be directly involved. But when it comes to the criminal system, when it comes to the victim, he is represented by the state is represented by the public prosecutor. They take care of everything in this particular case, and the victim has very minimal role. In most of the cases, the victim only steps in at the time of the trial. So in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court goes on to say a victim within the meaning of CRPC cannot be asked to wait till the commencement of the trial for asserting his or her right to participate in the proceedings. He or she has a legally vested right to be heard at every state post the occurrence of the offense. So what does this mean? This means that the minute there is a crime that is committed, even if it is the state which is representing the victim, still the victim will have to be heard at every stage, says the Supreme Court of India. In number of earlier scenarios, the victim was not heard. Why? Because the victim is represented by the state. You have the public prosecutor. Some of the issues have been dealt in the past, and as a result, they have got to know that there have been issues. So going forward, what you will have is the victim, his or her voice will also have to be heard as well. In the present situation, what exactly happened? This happens to be with respect to Ashish Mishra case, where he approached the Allahabad High Court to grant him regular bail, and during the course of the online bail proceedings, the victims were completely disconnected. Their application for rehearing of the bail application was also rejected by the Allahabad High Court. This is where the Supreme Court immediately steps in, and it also says to every court, including the Allahabad High Court, that just because the state is representing the victims, it doesn't mean the victims' viewpoints, the grievances need not be heard. If they have a problem, their claims will have to be heard, says the Supreme Court of India in this particular case. So what is that we understand here? So we understand that it is not only the state which is representing the victim which has to be heard, but in case the victim has a problem, in such case this grievance also has to be heard by the particular judiciary. So it can be the Sessions Court, it can be the High Court, or any other court in India. So this article clearly goes on to say that the Supreme Court has reiterated, in spite of the state representing the victim will have to be heard. The victim, if he has the grievances, the same will have to be addressed by the judiciary. So this particular judgment is very important from the criminal justice viewpoint. What are the significance of this particular judgment? First, the victim, as defined in section 2 of W of A of the Code of the Criminal Procedure, becomes a victim only after an accused has been charged with the offense. When you look into the definition, what does the definition say? Victim means a person who has suffered any loss or injury caused by reason of act or omission for which the accused person has been charged, and the expression victim includes his or her guardian or the legal heir. There are three important factors here. One is the person who is called as the victim. So when is a person called as a victim? Let's say a person has committed an act. What is a commission of an act? Let's say I go about taking a knife and I kill some person. So I'm lynching that particular person. That is an act. I'm doing something. That is what is called as an act. Then there is omission. What is omission? Let's say, for example, I am a public authority. I have been given a designated role that this will be a river. People should not be able to come close by to this particular river because there are certain activities that are conducted near this particular river. I have been given this designated role. So ideally, I should have safeguarded this particular place, should have prevented people from crossing a particular line. But during my day, during when the work was allocated to me, I have boozed as well. I am in a tipsy state. I am on a high state. Ideally, I should not have boozed. I should have not taken alcohol. But forgetting my responsibilities, what do? I consume alcohol. And during this period, there is a child who comes up, and this particular child does not know to read, and he enters this particular area and falls into the river. I had the responsibility that I was supposed to take care of something, but I didn't take care of something, which is what is called as omission. So because of an act or because of an omission, a person has suffered something. That will be a person who is called as a victim. So when the accused person has been charged, what do we mean by it? So there is a committal of an offense only after this particular accused has been arrested, charges have been filed against him. That is when this particular person becomes the victim, says the definition. But according to the Supreme Court definition, which has been interpreted in a new nuanced way, the minute there is an offense that is committed, that person becomes the victim. So what is the difference? In the earlier scenario, this particular person accused should be charged, but in this case, the minute the offense is committed, that particular person becomes the victim. So this is a new nuanced approach towards the definition. Followed by this, the court observed that the participatory rights of the victim extend all the way to the stage of appeal and revision. This is another add-on to the victims which has been given by the Supreme Court of India. However, there are some specific challenges with respect to the execution. What are these specific challenges? While the judgment grants participatory rights to the victims at all stages, investigation, inquiry, trial of the criminal process, it remains to be seen how the judgment is interpreted in the future and which rights are consequently identified. Yes, the Supreme Court in number of landmark judgments have given the judgments, but unfortunately, In spite of the Supreme Court giving judgments, this is not being practiced by the executive. Let's say, for example, the 377, it is decriminalized in the IPC section. Despite it is decriminalized by Indian Penal Code, there have been executive authorities who have been subjecting people to harassment as well. So in this particular case, despite the Supreme Court giving this particular order and giving its observation with respect to the victims' rights, we have to wait and watch whether it will be implemented in reality. So whether the grievances of the victim will be heard by the court of law. Yes, the Supreme Court has given its judgment, but is it being rightly implemented is what needs to be wait and watch. So basically, this entire proceedings is speaking about right to be informed about the proceedings, the right to protection of the victim, the right to speedy justice system, the right to present arguments and written submissions, the right to examine the witnesses, the right to be heard, and every other right that is given to the victim, so that the victim does not suffer injustice at the hands of the coach. So this is what this article all about. So this article currently goes on to conclude that if this particular Supreme Court judgment has to be implemented, it has to be executed in the near future. This will require not only the judicial stamp of approval, but also legislative recognition. So the legislature will have to take this into picture. They have to bring this particular judicial approval in the form of an act. They have to introduce the same either in the code of the criminal procedure or in any of the laws, so that this ultimately gets executed. So it is not just about the words of the judiciary, but this has to be implemented via the wordings, via the bill, via the act in the written format, says this author. So it is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the grim forewarnings of a global study on birds. The article here is speaking about the importance of the birds when it comes to the ecological ecosystem. And of late, because of the anthropogenic induced factors, because of industrialization, there is a grave threat to these birds. So this article basically examines what are the significance of the birds, what are the threats to these birds, and also gives us the way forward when it comes to the protecting the birds. What is the context? The state of the world's birds, which happens to be an annual review of environmental resources published by 9 natural sciences and aviation specialists across the globe, has revealed that the population of 48% of 10,994 surviving species of birds is declining. So it goes on to say the number of birds, the kinds of species of birds, their numbers are declining. So when we look into the statistics further, the study found that 5,245, or about 48% of the existing bird species worldwide, are known or suspected to be undergoing population declines, while 4,295, or 39% of the species, have stable trends, and about 7%, or 778 species, have increased their population. So larger proportion of the birds have been decreasing, certain proportion of the birds have a stable trend, and there are few which have also increased their populations as well. Further, the study draws from the BirdLife International latest assessment of the IUCN Red List as well, where according to it, 13.5% species are in the global extinction scale, about 798 are present in the vulnerable, then we have 460 which are present in the endangered, 223 as critically endangered, and 52 species were considered to be data deficient. Now the most important question is, after we read through the statistics, how is that the birds are contributing to the significance or the ecological ecosystem? When we speak about the birds, they have 3 important functions in the system. One is the ecological role, second is the functional role, third is what is called as the cultural role. What is it about the ecological role? Birds are a truly global taxon, with one or more species occupying all habitats across the Earth's terrestrial surface, including urban environments with no natural analogs. Birds contribute towards many ecosystem services that either directly or indirectly benefit the humanity. So basically, just like we are present on this earth, there are birds which are also present on earth as well. Just like we the humans are part of this ecosystem, we also have birds which are part of this ecosystem, and their rights will have to be represented is the first important factor. The functional role of the birds within the ecosystem as pollinators, seed dispensers, ecosystem engineers, scavengers, predators not only facilitates accrual and maintenance of biodiversity, it also supports human endeavors such as sustainable agriculture via pest control, besides aiding other animals to multiply. If the world is without the bats or the insects or the butterflies or the birds who will carry out the pollination, the world will not have these many trees that we have. So the first important factor is the pollinator. They help in dispersing of the plant seeds, and this ultimately means all the beautiful trees that we have, it is not the human beings which have built it, but it is these birds, these bats which are able to pollinate number of trees as well. So the first major function happens to be the pollinator. Added to it, when we speak about pest control, what exactly happens? Birds consume insects like mosquitoes, beetles, moths, basically to feed themselves as well as their young ones. Birds also catch huge number of insects from their larval form, which is high in protein for the birds, and at the same time they also make sure that as and when they eat these insects, they also protect the plants as well as the animals. Hence, birds play a critical role in reducing and maintaining the population of the insects when it comes to the natural system. Followed by this, they also have the economic significance as well. Their meat can also be used, their products can also be used, their eggs can also be used, their meats can also be used by the people. Added to it, the excreta of the seed birds and bats are also used as the fertilizers. Let's say in countries like Peru, we have something called as guana, where it is nothing but the accumulated excrement of seabirds as well as bat. This is also used as a fertilizer because it contains high nitrogen, phosphate and potassium, and this happens to be one of the key important essential for the plant growth. So it is not only the meat, it is not only their eggs, it is also used as a fertilizer in Peru and multiple other countries. Beyond the ecological role, functional role, economic importance, it is also used symbolic as well as artistic values. Bird watching is a global pastime practiced by millions of people. Garden bird feeding is another valuable part, which is valued at about $5 to $6 billion per year, and this is also growing by 4% every year annually. And feeding birds helps to restore the balance of the nature. These are some of the advantages and the significance of the birds when it comes to the ecosystem. However, there are threats contributing to avian biodiversity loss, changes in land cover and land use, the continued growth of human population leading to directly conversion and degradation of primary natural habitats and consequent loss of biodiversity, other factors like habitat fragmentation and degradation, impact of invasive alien species and diseases associated with these birds, infrastructure, energy demands, pollution have all hit the birds very frequently. Agrochemical and pharmaceutical usage have hit them hard. Global trade teleconnections, it refers to climate variability linked between non-contiguous geographic regions resulting due to global trade as well as climate change have all hit the birds very hard, and unfortunately because of the human induced factors, these birds have become the major sufferers. In order to overcome all these issues, what is that we have to do? The first thing that we have to do is create an awareness. Just like we are part of this ecosystem, birds are also part of the ecosystem. So an awareness has to be raised to the people so that they do not go about killing it. Added to it, there are many other important conservation steps that needs to be taken. Let's say there is a particular area where the bird usually comes. This should not be disturbed. There should be no infiltration of the human beings. In such areas, we should avoid conducting industrial activities so that these birds are undisturbed as well. So the basic idea is to change social attitude, individual attitude and behavior so that the degree of security for these birds is kept intact. So only when we are able to do so, we will be able to attain well-being, sustainability, climate resilience and environmental justice to these birds is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article says moderating the publisher platform relationship. What is this article speaking about? The article here is speaking about two important entities. One happens to be the publisher, the other happens to be the platform. Who is the publisher? Let's say, for example, the Hindu is a newspaper, the Indian Express is a newspaper, Times of India is a newspaper. These are the publishers. Then you have India Today, so on and so forth. These are the different media outlets, the press media outlets. These are called as the publishers. Then you have the platform. What is the platform? Let's say we have the Google or the Facebook. This happens to be the platform. What is the current controversy? You have number of media outlets who write articles. For example, the Hindu writes articles, Indian Express writes article, every news print media writes its articles. But they are not able to generate revenues and profits via the advertisements, but it is these platforms, that is the Google as well as Facebook, who are able to mint money, they are able to extract money. So this article currently goes on to say that in Canada they have introduced one of the bills, and if it is given consent later assent by their respective government, then this will be called as the Online News Act. So basically what would happen, in order to prevent that entire consolidation of power in the hands of Google and Facebook, which are acting as the digital media intermediaries, they will have to distribute, they have to speak to these media outlets, enter into a consensus such that there is revenue sharing between these digital media intermediaries and these publishers, is what is this article all about. So we have the Canadian government which has introduced this particular legislation to control the digital news intermediaries. As we discussed, who are these digital news intermediaries? This includes companies like Google as well as Facebook. Let us try and understand what is the necessity of this particular law. When we speak about laws, why they come into picture, that is because there is a certain deficiency in the system. In order to make sure that this deficiency is addressed, that is why laws are made in the respective country. So what is happening right now? When you consider the traditional media, let's say you have the print media, you also have the visual media. It is the print media and the visual media which are able to control lot of media before, but now what you have is these digital news intermediaries generate a lot of revenue because of these publishers. Let me give you an example. Google and Facebook earn revenue from news content published by the media houses, but they fail to share the revenue fairly. How? Let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, you ask Google, or you go to any of the search engines, you ask a particular relevant question. Let's say you are asking about the privacy related laws, or you're speaking about, let's say, so one of the celebrities, let's say Johnny Depp and Amber issue. So in this particular case, there are a number of news outlets who would have written articles. So what would Google do? It has its search engine which will also give you articles as well. So the minute these articles are read, you would understand what that article is all about, and you would be able to derive an ultimate conclusion. This does not just give you an headline, but it also gives you the narrative of that particular article, which is also called as zero-click search. What is zero-click search? Basically, whenever you click a particular website link, it drives you to that particular website, and when you go to that particular website, there are ads that are projected on the left as well as the right. So the minute you click on it, that is how that particular website, let's say Indian Express or the Hindu, would be able to generate the revenue. But in this particular case, you don't click that particular link, but instead what Google does, it just showcases you that article. It will give you a perception about what is this issue all about. So you don't click that particular link of that particular website, but instead you are able to draw the entire conclusion. So who is getting an advantage? It is Google. And similarly, if you go on Facebook, you will also have links as well, links of Indian Express, link of the Hindu, link of India Today, so on and so forth. So you don't have to click it, but this will give you a perception as to what this issue is all about. In that case, Who is generating the revenue? It is Facebook. Who is generating the revenue? It is Google. So they are able to generate a lot of revenue, and unfortunately the press media outlets are not able to generate much of it because of the zero click search. So this article currently goes on to say that it has given certain statistics with respect to Canada, where the public broadcaster CBC in an article said, according to government figures, more than 450 news outlets in Canada have closed since 2008, and at least one third of Canadian journalism jobs have disappeared over the same time period. The dominance over advertising, once enjoyed by the legacy media, is over. Google and Facebook have a combined 80% share of all online ad revenue in Canada and rake in an eye-popping 9.7 billion a year according to the government data. Since they control every media outlets indirectly, they are able to generate the revenue at the cost of real media outlets. This is why the Canadian government decides that they have to make sure they bring in a legislation where this legislation clearly goes on to say that if there is Google, if there are Facebook, these people will have to enter into an agreement with the media outlets. That is, there might be some of the newspapers or the visual media outlets, if they are showcasing such articles, they have to pay certain revenue to them, is what is this legislation all about. So basically this particular legislation goes on to say that because the media outlets are suffering greater losses of revenue, this has to be compensated by either Google or Facebook, whichever platform that particular article is posted on, and ultimately revenue sharing will have to be agreed upon via a mutual contract. So the government website lists 4 expected outcomes of this particular legislation, which include a framework that supports fair business relationship between the digital platforms and the news outlets, sustainability in the news ecosystem, maintenance of the press freedom, as well as diversity within the news landscape. So this article currently goes on to say that when it comes to the media outlets, they do make a lot of investments as well. They do have to run studios, they have to make sure that they have offices, they need equipment, they need journalists, they also have to employ staffers. So their primary source is also advertising. Yes, people would be buying the Hindu, people would be buying the Indian Express, but then it is only one third of their revenue. That is, the subscription is just one third of their revenue, but rest of the other revenue is generated via the advertisements. In case we don't click on that link, in case it doesn't take us to that particular website, they generate zero revenue, where Google is just showcasing with that particular thumbnail, and Google is taking away all the important revenues at the cost of the media outlets. And that is why this needs to be taken check, is what is this article all about. So basically this entire process of the Online News Act basically wants to ensure revenue sharing between the digital platforms and news providers, provide for the collective bargaining between these platforms as well as the media outlets, so that they enter into a contract on a mutual basis, and ultimately this mutual contract basis is respected. And if that does not work out, then what will happen? A mandatory arbitration framework will immediately kick in as the last resort. If none of the contract agreements, if none of the mutual agreements doesn't work, then finally you have the government which will also step in as well. So this entire paradigm, this entire legislation also aims to correct the imbalance, much as the same way as the Australian law hoped to do so, by ensuring platforms negotiate commercial deals with the news publishers. So there have been n number of examples in the past as well. One such example happens to be from Australia. Australia also had similar issue. They felt that these news media outlets are suffering a greater damage because of Google and Facebook. In fact, Australia legislation also is similar, and Canada has taken the precedence from Australia. In 2019, in Australia, the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission did come up with a report about the loss faced by the traditional media, and as a result, Australia came up with such a legislation. A similar concept is imported into Canada. But why are we discussing this? This is something to do with Canada, but why are we discussing now in the UPSC Hindu analysis? That is because a similar issue can also surface in India as well. In India, the Competition Commission of India ordered investigations into Google, the basis being the bargaining power imbalance and the denial of fair share in the advertising revenue, which has been alleged by the Digital News Publishers Association, a group of the digital arms of India's leading media companies. So, similar such issue can also prop up in India. Indian media outlets are also suffering greater damage as well. So, if it is being suffered in Australia, if the people are suffering in Canada, there are issues and concerns that have already been raised in India with respect to the Competition Commission of India in the near future. We may also see that the Indian legislatures may look into these type of laws in Australia and Canada and introduce similar such laws to govern the digital media intermediaries. Apart from this, France is another country which has forced internet platforms to enter into agreements with the publishers. France has also announced a digital tax on Google, Facebook, and Apple companies with over 750 million euro revenue in this regard. And United Kingdom has also laid out powers of the digital market unit, which happens to be a regulator that it had set up in 2021 to take on the dominance of Google as well as Facebook. So it is not just one single country, but there are a number of countries which are facing the heat because of Google and Facebook dominance, that they have created a kind of duopoly, and this needs to be kept in check. And that is why we have the governments in multiple countries take up this initiative. In fact, when you consider United States of America as well, which is home to Facebook, Google, and Apple, it is also negotiating legislations to enforce a fair revenue sharing model between the tech giants as well as the news publishers. How has Google reacted to it? Google has said that it has serious concerns about this particular legislation that has been introduced in Canada. And then you have Facebook, that is the Meta, which has also voiced out similar opinions as well. But when you consider what happened in Australia, they also had similar concerns in Australia, but eventually they went on to agree to this particular law, and they also struck a deal with the news publishers. So, going forward, a similar legislation is introduced now in Canada, and in all likelihood, Google may also enter into contracts with those news publishers. So, this will eventually mean that multiple other countries will take the precedence, and ultimately, this will be implemented in India, France, United Kingdom, United States of America, so on and so forth, and they may bring their own variations to this particular law. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says the learning grounds of Ukraine. The article here is speaking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We have discussed about this article in the past 1 month or so, but our focus today would be with respect to three important parameters. That is, one is what is the lessons that India can draw from this entire issue. There are three lessons that India can draw. One is the importance of the alliances. Second is the importance of intelligence gathering. The third is about self-reliance. What is the importance of alliance? When it comes to India, currently we have Pakistan on the western front, which happens to be an aggressive state and the enemy state with respect to India. And when it comes to eastern front, what we have is China. These two states, in the near future, we may have the two front war as well. In that particular case, which are the countries which will stand by us in the present situation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine? On Russia's side, though Russia is militarily advanced, it is supported by China, which also happens to be another superpower, and Ukraine, in spite of it being a small country, not that military advanced, is able to withstand the pressure of Russia. That is primarily because Europe and NATO have been supporting Ukraine. So whenever there is a war and whenever there is a two-fledged war for India, like from the Pakistan side as well as China side, we have to make sure that we have an alliance. Whose alliance that we are going to take? Is it from Russia? Is it from United States of America? Is it from the Western countries? All that we have to do is to prioritize and make sure that we have an alliance plan is the first major lesson. The second major lesson is in reference to the intelligence gathering. Even before this entire issue happened, you had United States of America and its intelligence which was able to predict that Russia would be invading Ukraine in the near future. And as it anticipated, it eventually happened as well. So we should be anticipating, our intelligence should be to such a level that we should be able to anticipate in advance. We should also take preventive measures as well. And apart from this, the availability of intelligence remains critical to India's security interests. India should also focus on establishing high resolution satellites and also build sufficient capacity to gather strategic intelligence within the enemy territory as well. This is the second lesson. The third is in reference to the self-reliance. What is self-reliance? We know for the fact that India imports a lot of defense equipment from multiple countries. It can be from Israel, it can be from France, it can be from Russia, it can be from United States of America. One of the other reasons why India is not able to condemn the aggressive act of Russia is also because our entire defense mechanisms and the equipment is being imported from Russia. In order to avoid this, in order to avoid this dilemma in the near future, what we have to become is Atmanirbhar. And this Atmanirbharata or the self-reliance is about India would be able to manufacture her own defense equipment. If we are able to lay the foundation today, we would be able to generate the benefits at least 2 to 3 decades later. So India has to focus on Atmanirbharata or self-reliance is the third major lesson. So this article on a whole is speaking about these three parameters is what is this article all about. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. There is an urgent need to amend the CRPC in order to facilitate the recognition of victim rights and to create a statutory framework. Substantiate. Discuss the ecological significance of birds and the threats contributing to avian biodiversity loss. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give for positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.